Well, my body lies over the ocean. My body lies over the sea. Ooh, my body lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my body to me. Bring back, bring back. Oh, bring back.
Welcome to the Scott Arizala Show from camphacker.org. My name is Travis Allison. Let me now say a big camp welcome to our host, Scott Arizala. Hi Scott, how's it going?
Good. Hi Travis, how are you? Thanks for hosting once again the Scott Arizala Show. I'm Scott Arizala. I am a summer camp consultant and trainer, and I am excited to be here.
So today, Scott, you said you wanted to talk about free play. Can you introduce that idea to the listeners?
Sure. Well, for viewers that may not know, for the last year I've lived in California. And last year I lived down in Santa Barbara, which is right on the beach. And I have a now 3-year-old. Her name is Linnea. And there was something that happened the first few times that we went to the beach that just struck me. You know, anybody who's ever been around a 1.5, 2, 3-year-old before, you know that you are pretty much the center of a lot of their play. She's just now kind of getting into what we see in a little bit older kids, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, which is a little bit more of the independent play, a little bit more of the pretend play, things like that. But up until now, it's been really sort of adult-directed play. Last year when we moved to Santa Barbara with the beach right there, the ocean right there, we went there all the time. And the first few times I took her to the beach, I noticed straight away that there could be this really unstructured sort of feel to what she was doing. It was amazing. We'd get there and I wouldn't have anything. I'd forget the buckets and the shovels and the whatever, and she would find rocks and sticks and stick her feet in the water and just run her hand through the sand. And it was amazing to watch, because as a 2-year-old, you're just never expecting for this sort of unstructured free play to exist. And it got me thinking about what's sort of missing in a lot of what our kids are experiencing in recreation, in summer camp, just after school, on the weekends, so on and so forth. And I think one of the pieces that seems to be declining is this opportunity for unstructured free play, this sort of imaginative, creative, social, sort of self-expressive kind of place that kids get into that is very much so like what I was experiencing with Linnea at the beach. It reminds me of something that a dear friend of mine named Paul Sheridan, who's the camp director or executive director up at Four Winds Westward Ho, which is a camp up in the San Juan Islands outside of Seattle. He talks about when he's talking to parents, he often relates a story or sort of an anecdote to them that talks about, you know, how many of us in the room were able to ride our bikes in the neighborhood as when we were growing up, ride our bikes in the neighborhood until the streetlights came on. And depending on the age of the group, almost everybody typically raises their hand. And then he goes on to ask, well, how many of you let your kids ride their bikes in the neighborhood wherever they want to go until the streetlight comes on? And then, of course, everybody's hand comes down. And he says, you know, regardless of why, you know, us as parents specifically and our society in sort of general has moved away from those kinds of experiences, it's up to us as parents, and then of course as youth development professionals and folks who care about the experience of kids, to fill in that opportunity, to fill in those experiences, because those are very valuable experiences that we can all look back on and say, you know, I learned how to you know, sort of sustain my attention and my energy on one thing. I learned how to be social in a completely different way without adults. I learned how to use my creativity. I learned how to frankly be patient. A lot of different sorts of things in those moments. And so all of those kinds of, Paul's anecdote, my experience with my daughter, all those sort of different pieces led me to this place of really wanting to talk with camp professionals specifically about unstructured free play. How can we do more of that at camp, and why it's so important? Simply because I think kids aren't getting it anywhere else.
And Scott, I don't know if you read Jen Selke's blog at thecampdirector.com, but she wrote about this just this week.
I haven't had an opportunity to read her blog. What does she say about it?
Well, she was just talking about parent expectations, and she comes from a day camp background, and so for them, I think they noticed that parents sort of thought that they were just, I guess they implied that the staff was being lazy because the kids were allowed to, and they weren't teaching them. And how would you answer that?
Well, first of all, I think Jennifer hit it directly on the head. I think that's the sort of upward battle that we're facing, and the sort of cultural battle that we're facing. If kids aren't, quote unquote, doing anything, well, then they're not learning. That I'm not getting my money's worth, right? And having some open time where staff sort of back up a little bit and allow kids to sort of experience whatever games they're playing, or having the social piece. Well, then of course you're not doing something at camp, and I think, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I think one is like Paul does, and talk specifically about what the opportunities are that we're trying to give kids by not necessarily structuring every single minute. I think another extremely important piece is to talk about the skills, the actual skills that we can learn in those moments, and how those things are important to a camp, a recreation, a life experience, like navigating the social landscape without sort of the pressure of adults around. Things like using your imagination and creativity. I mean, I find it so interesting that all this sort of talk with the sort of in the adult world of the bad economy and the sort of decrease in the amount of jobs available. Like, what are Fortune 500 companies looking for? They're looking for people who can sort of be, using the cliche, think outside of the box, be creative, work together in groups, be able to problem solve, pull in different ideas and be innovative. All these things that aren't being taught in business school, aren't being taught in graduate school, frankly aren't being taught, anywhere past much, we'll say preschool or kindergarten. The reality is those are the kinds of things that we learn when we are down on the ground. We've got 45 minutes before evening activity or whatever it might be at camp, where we have this opportunity for some free play. So I know I didn't answer your question directly. How would I answer parents who have some sort of criticism, or they think my staff are being lazy? I think I would say specifically to them that we create open, sort of free play time. So my staff are actually doing exactly what I've asked them to do, which is stay present and supervise, maybe have some posts so we're having a sort of containment in a way as far as keeping kids in a relatively safe, supervised space. But we're allowing for the kids to develop some of these kinds of skills that they don't get when we take them for an hour to arts and crafts, and there's 4 different kinds of activities for them to do. Or we take them to soccer, and they run some drills, and they learn all different kinds of maybe really fun, maybe really exciting ways to play soccer, but those are structured times.
So we know that from developmental psychology that this is such an important time. And you've said the 45 minutes before dinner or some other times that camp could set aside to do it. Should camps be thinking about changing their schedule to relax that always doing things thing that we do?
That's a huge question. And I don't know if I'm comfortable saying every camp should do something, A, B, or C. I think what we should do is think about sort of the principle underneath what it is that we're talking about and see how it fits into the real practical or logistical space of your camp and your program and your facility and how that might work. How can we, continue to supervise kids, so on and so forth. Are you a day camp or resident camp? Do you have, resident camps typically have, obviously they have more time with kids. So it's easier to build in maybe, as you're sort of talking about, relaxing the schedule a little bit and building in some times like that. So I think there's a number of questions that you have to answer about your particular camp before I could make a recommendation to say you should do this or you shouldn't. But to sort of back up on your question, I think the first part of your question is really what we need to be talking about. We know this is important. We know, as far as developmental psychology, that there are skills and development that happens in unstructured sort of free time or free play. We also know anecdotally from a lot of our experiences growing up that this is a good, important, meaningful time. If we know all those things, that's then the idea is we need to take that and that principle and see, well, how can we apply it better? Certainly I would say to camps, let's take a look at your schedule. Where can we have some downtime? Where can we build in? I love when resident camps that are going for more than a week do some different programming towards sort of the middle of let's say they have a 2-week program, so during the quote-unquote weekend of their program, right? Maybe do an all-day event where instead of having the normal rotations or the normal classes or the normal free choice activities, they're doing, sort of an all-camp activity all day long. I think the more we can look creatively at program, the more we could find some opportunities to do stuff like this. Absolutely. Can you open up 45 minutes, after dinner before evening activity at an overnight camp, or 45 minutes after lunch before the afternoon activities start at a day camp? I think, it's well worth a look. But I would stop there before pushing too hard on camps to say really change your program. I would say how do we invest more in this idea and this principle? And once we decide we're going to do it, once we've decided that this is important, then we get into some of the issues that I think maybe Jennifer talked about in her blog about what does this look like from the outside? How do we communicate this to our parents? How does this serve our sort of programmatic mission, our organization's mission, as far as delivering certain kind of values or certain kind of education or certain kind of experiences to our participants?
3 Adventures International Camp staff.
3 things you should know about 3 Adventures. 1. Our owners are all former camp directors. 2. We're a high-quality company that's easy on your budget. 3. Background checks. Our international camp staff come from all over the world, and every one of them has had a background check. No exceptions, no excuses. 3adventures.com, the site to get great camps connected with great staff.
Scott, did you have your own experience with free play at camp as a kid? Like, did you have that sort of freedom when you were a kid?
Absolutely, man. In fact, if you go back through, those are, I think, the moments that I might remember the best. With my best friend, Ben Mansell, and another great friend of ours, Philip Black, at camp. We grew up together going to camp. We went every single year together. The times that I remember the most, we had at my camp what we called Free Swim 1 and Free Swim 2, which was probably about a 45-minute period after morning activities. That was Free Swim 1, and about a 45-minute period after afternoon activities. That was Free Swim 2. And of course, it's labeled that because the waterfront was open and there was free swim. But the sort of camp was open. You could kind of do what you chose to do. And I can remember so many times going off to what we called the area of our camp we called Bubbling Springs, and the 3 of us going back there and throwing rocks in the river and talking, and sort of building forts in the woods. I mean, so many things that I can remember. Now of course the structure of camp was different when I grew up. The supervision and so what we think about as far as supervision and liability and all that kind of stuff was different. So I'm not necessarily saying that, you know, you go ahead and let everybody loose and, you know, let, you know, 3, 10-year-olds go off to Bubbling Springs or off into the woods by themselves. I mean, you know, there's some issues there, obviously. But yes, I mean, to answer your question, I have some of my fondest memories of that time, and you know, frankly, we got into some mischief and some trouble during those times that taught me some good lessons. You know, mischief and trouble that I can still remember to this very day, as far as how my counselors had to talk to me, and the camp director, you know, sitting in the camp director's office and feeling, you know, sort of that kind of wrath on my shoulders. And I mean, those are really good experiences for me.
The memories that stick with me about my own camp experience are definitely those free play times. They were the counselors that would just take us into the woods for a couple of hours and we'd just play together. And I remember trying to get that through to my staff, who, if they ever saw free time on the schedule, would just panic. And I always wanted to sort of get through to them that this could be such fun time with their kids when you do some great bonding and grow together in an awesome way, because you're just being creative and having fun together.
I mean, one of my very favorite times at camp as a counselor was always what we called cabin activities, which, you know, for some was the excuse to sort of turn the music up and take an extra rest hour, and, you know, sort of constantly shush at their kids. You know, and so you've got to know who your staff are and who you're working with. But, you know, some of my very favorite times as a counselor was during those cabin activities, because it was just on us. And it was a little bit more structured than maybe what you're talking about with your staff, but it was exactly what, you know, we would do. Okay, here's a whole evening or a whole afternoon. Take your kids and go do something fun. My kids, when I was a counselor, a cabin counselor at resident camp, I always had the youngest boys. I always had 6, 7, 8-year-old boys. That was sort of my age group that I just loved to work with. And I would say some of the very best times I ever had as a counselor would be out hunting for salamanders. We would literally, you know, drop everything. We'd go out into the woods. 2 hours we'd be out there flipping over, you know, rotten logs looking for salamanders. It's pretty much zero structure to that activity. But, you know, you take a 7-year-old and you say, hey, we're going to go get a little dirty and look for lizards. And, you know, they're pretty into it. And the kinds of again, you know, back to sort of what I was saying, the kinds of conversations that would happen, the creativity, the stories that would sort of bubble up as we're off on this, you know, salamander adventure and, you know, so on and so forth, it was thrilling to be a part of.
Well, that brings up another point, Scott. The people who are our counselors now are or have been raised in this over-programmed generation, and they themselves are not used to having time with nothing going on, where they had to sort of, you know, do their own thinking and do their own playing. So how would you teach these skills to a staff member so that they'd be comfortable with the time and would make good use of it?
Sure. You know, that's actually a question I feel like I've been wrestling, not only as a camp trainer and a consultant, somebody who comes and talks to other staffs and directors about, but my own staff. You know, the young people that work for me. How do you actually teach something like that? And I think what it boils down to is you have to teach the skills of spontaneity, creativity, and imagination. I mean, we all have it. You know, I think that we fall prey to the sort of myth in our culture about creativity, which is, you know, only some people have it. I'm just not creative. You know, I can't draw or paint or sing or play guitar, so therefore I'm not creative. And it's just such a myth. I mean, of course, those things are creative, but creativity, using your imagination, developing, you know, spontaneity, those are skills. Those are skills just like, you know, being organized or shooting archery. I mean, you know, we've got to practice those things. A few years back, my assistant director, Sylvia, and I were wrestling with this very question. How do we teach our staff to do this? And we started to make a list. What do we want our camp counselors to do? What is the actual behavior that we want of them? And this list was frankly funny because it was things like, I'd really like my staff to wear a wig every once in a while and not really have any kind of reason to wear a wig. Or, speak in an accent for like the next hour. Use all your words in song for the next, day. Come up with, names for all, like, James Bond names for all of the kids in your cabin. Come up with a new way every day to do, count off instead of just counting off. Spell a word or play some sort of game to bring them together. I mean, we literally like developed this list of things that we wanted to see, and we realized that practicing some of these skills is as simple as that. Giving people real practical actions to go and do. So much so that we developed something called circus cards, which is a pack of 60 plus cards we give to each one of our units each summer, and the unit leader sort of doles them all out at the beginning, and it can be things like take sometime over the next hour, take a camper poll about something silly. It can be like, lead an activity or a song between now and the next, or during the transition between this activity and next activity. Act like you're riding a horse when you walk to lunch. I mean, it's those kinds of things. And what we found was that is helping our young people exercise some of these skills. And so when it comes to, you've got 15 minutes before lunch, what do? Well, do you just plop down and sit around and do nothing and let the kids kind of, whatever? Or do you try to create an environment where they might be inspired to come up with a game of their own? Or maybe you take all the stuff out of your backpack, you dump it on the ground, and you say, hey guys, we got 15 minutes. What do you think we can do with some of this stuff? And help both our participants and our staff along the way of exercising some of these, what I think of as skills.
Do you have, any other things, Scott, that you want to add? We're getting pretty close to the time that we've said that we'd be recording, but I wondered if you had any closing thoughts on this.
Well, again, at the end of the day, I think what we need to think about is, what do we want for our kids? What do we want for our participants? And, I think a lot of the answer in that really is about we want to engage their imagination, their sense of self, their sense of expression, their creativity, their independence from adults, their responsibility for themselves, their patience, their focus and their attention. I think if we can really talk clearly about those kinds of ideas, I think understanding a concept like unstructured free play gives us an opportunity to develop those things in our participants in a way that we can't, simply by running them through the busiest schedule possible, so on and so forth. So what I would say is let's, as an industry, let's as youth development professionals, take a step back and really look at what's important, what's developmentally appropriate, and really sort of engage them on that level and not be scared to, I think, take a step back from what the rest of society is saying, which is have them programmed from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, and say, well, is that really delivering the best of what we were just talking about?
Well, so if you want more of these shows from Scott, just keep an eye on camphacker.org, and I would just want to say thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Travis. For more information on what I do, you can hit my website at thecampcounselor.com. Appreciate everybody tuning in live, as well as anybody who might be watching this in the future. Thanks for watching. See you next summer.
Well, my body